What is up, guys? Wrestling Premiere is here. Return of the Hitman. By the sound of my voice, I obviously realized that it was one of my all-time favorites. Matter of fact, Bret's a top 5 favorite of mine because of the way he treated wrestling. It felt much more natural with him in the ring. Add to that his impressive look with the leather jacket, the pink sunglasses, pink tights. He had a different charisma compared to the other top guys in WWE history. And while his mic skills were never on the level of others, by the time 1997 rolled around, that was an area he worked on greatly. You can notice a huge improvement in his promo skills. Either that or he was just a very good promo as a heel. Either way, the Hitman was doing extremely well that year. He had just signed a 20-year contract with the World Wrestling Federation and was the world champion for the 5th time. Hart's year at face value was truly exceptional. In my eyes, he had finally peaked as a performer, and from here it wasn't going to get better. Now, the terms of the 20-year deal allowed Hart to finish up his career and transition into a backstage producer or something. Anything that relates to the company. However, Vince McMahon claimed that there was no way to actually follow through with the deal, so he basically kicked Bret Hart out. He's like, oh, there's no future for you here in the WWF because they're transitioning to a different era. And it wasn't like Hart was going to do bad, because WCW had been eyeing him for about a year and a half. He was actually offered a contract that paid him about $2.5 million a year, and their previous offer in 1996 was a bit better with $9 million in 3 years. Ultimately, Bret Hart had no choice but to leave, because for one, he was almost 40. The WWF was focusing on other guys and, of course, the cash. From here, we all know about Montreal. I'm not gonna lie, but it's actually my favorite wrestling topic of all time. I always read up on it at least once a year, watch Wrestling with Shadows, all that, but you're not gonna see a video about it from me. Fast forward to November 10th, Bret Hart had gotten screwed, was pissed off over the outcome of the match. This was a huge opportunity for WCW to do something about it. It was a present gift wrapped by the WWF, and all they had to do was follow through. During that night, WCW decided to quickly acknowledge Hart's signing. They did this by having the NWO come out waving a Canadian flag. At one point, they performed the Canadian national anthem and claimed that Bret Hart is joining the NWO. The commentary was shook. They couldn't believe this at all and were pretty damn disappointed. In other places, a couple of wrestlers gave their opinion towards the Bret and NWO news, but there wasn't much about him until the December 8th, 1997 episode where Ric Flair spoke about the Hitman. He said that Mr. Canada has made the mistake of calling himself the greatest of all time. And then he's like, Bret joined the NWO to avoid me. To top it off, he said that comparing Hart to himself is like comparing John Elway to Jim Kelly. And have no fear, Bret Hart was here the following week. Seeing as J.J. Dillon wanted an actual referee for the Bischoff-Zbyszko match at Starrcade, and seeing as Eric Bischoff wanted an NWO referee, Dillon chose Bret Hart, and once the crowd took notice, they went crazy. The appearance was about as sudden as anything. Bischoff was all excited and the music just sounded like some random DVD commercial or something. It didn't capture what the Hitman was all about. They would rectify that, but in the moment, Bret Hart was finally in WCW. He accepted the referee position. Bischoff smiled like a Broncos fan at the time and mentioned the millions of Ted Turner's money, but he warned Eric not to look for help during the match and mentioned how he knows what it's like to be screwed. Bischoff made an effort referring to the $7.5 million a year. Basically, he knew that he was screwed, no pun intended. The Hitman didn't wait until December 28th, rather he caused some mischief already, showing that he ain't with the NWO. With that said, there was huge ramifications behind the Bischoff and Zbyszko match. Winner takes over Monday Nitro. The match sucked harder than a vacuum, but by the end, Bischoff was the loser via disqualification. And most importantly, the Hitman showed where his loyalties lied. This wasn't Bret's final appearance that night, as he was involved in the epic Hogan-Sting match. Atmosphere and vibe was epic, but the match doesn't help that Sting technically lost the match. Not technically, he lost the match clean. He lost the match clean as a whistle, yet Bret Hart told off the timekeeper. Bret Hart then said that he didn't want to see someone screwed over like himself and restarted the match. When you look at it, he literally screwed Hulk Hogan. Sting hits the splash, Scorpion Deathlock, and there's a new champion. The whole thing was executed weirdly, and it didn't seem to make Bret likable, and most importantly, Sting lost clean. That's a story for another day, but the next night on Nitro, Bret Hart cut his first actual promo. He said that the NWO suck, called them the most evil, corrupt scum, and took a jab at the WWF comparing them to each other. Hey, look who it is. Hart seemed pretty optimistic and excited about his future opponents such as Sting, and he told everybody that WCW is going to find out what he's all about soon. He told Hulk Hogan that he's been looking for him for a long time and indicated that their paths are going to cross sooner or later. It's funny seeing this because we all know how things went for the Hart and Hogan. They never had a true pay-per-view match. The following week on Nitro, Hart finally came face-to-face with the Nature Boy. Ric Flair straight up undermined Bret Hart and was confused over the whole best moniker. He had an issue with that, but then the DVD commercial music played and Bret Hart showed up. The first time in over 5 years, he came face-to-face with a then 13-time champion. The Nature Boy wanted to hear Bret call himself the best in person, and it wasn't like Ric Flair thought Bret sucked. He knew how much of a big deal the Hitman was in Canada, but this is Atlanta, and he's the finest example of USA manhood. Once again, he asked Bret to say it. The newcomer didn't hesitate and said that he's the best. He even told Rick that if he's got a problem, well, too bad. That wasn't enough, and so Flair listed a bunch of guys such as Harley Race and questioned Hart's statement. It was perplexing to him that Bret thought he was actually better than himself. Things started getting tense around here, and Mean Gene wanted them to save it for another time. They never got going though. Soon enough, Tony Schiavone revealed that a match was booked for Sold Out on January 24th, and of course Mike Tenay wanted Hart's thoughts on the match. He's talking random stuff about how he's a 5-time WWF champion, and you can hear some boos. But to sum it all up, he refused to let go of the pedal. He wanted to prove that he's the best there is, and then Ric Flair appeared. Same as Monday, he wanted to hear him say it and prove it. Hart responds. Flair then says that in 25 years, this was the damnedest thing anybody has ever said to him. He mentioned how Hart was going insane for him at 14 years old, being mesmerized with what he's all about, and he seemed to make his accomplishments much grander than Bret's. Sure, he was WWF champion 5 times, but he, Ric Flair, was wrestling Hulk Hogan. Wrestling in Tokyo with the best of them, and despite this, he has the audacity to say he's better. And so Hart responded saying he just might have to beat the man in order to be the man. This somewhat offended Flair, and he told Bret that it's not just about beating the man, but staying the man. Talk about dancing over somebody. Like, I just can't see how Bret looked good in this promo. Flair was doing cartwheels all over him, was the outright winner. You can't tell me that Bret at any point looked better in this promo. Sure, he looked kind of cool with a nonchalant, calm attitude, but he lost that bad, in my opinion. At the same time, Jim Neidhart finally made his WCW return and vouched for Bret Hart, saying he's the best. Since he said that 4-letter word, Ric Flair immediately came out. Also, rumor has if you say Bret Hart the best 4 times and turn off the lights, Ric Flair will show up. Once again, that statement offended him, but Neidhart refused to budge. He called Bret Hart the best, and since Flair was so heated, Jim challenged him to a match. This fight was one-sided due to Flair's brass knuckles, and he took a page out of his opponent's book and connected it with a figure 4 on the ring post. After a bit, the Hitman came to his brother-in-law's aid, and Flair ran away, but the damage was done. Had a Sold Out, they had yet another confrontation. Ric Flair started doing what he usually does, going super insane. Then Bret Hart interrupted. Oddly enough, Bret actually gave Flair some huge praise. He even called him one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, but unlike Flair, he's grown up with wrestling his entire life. He said that he's waited for this very moment, and no, he wasn't out here to disrespect Flair nor Americans. But Saturday, though, was going to be a long day for the Nature Boy. He had one goal in mind, and that's running on top of him. Bret said that he didn't need to utter the whole best thing because on Sunday morning, Flair's going to feel it. His response, he proclaimed this to be a very memorable moment. Whatever they said to each other, come Monday, Tuesday, one of them is going to be wrong. While Flair had so much respect for the Hart family, he refused to hear Bret say that he's a better wrestler than him. Flair also made it an effort to mention that he's not fighting tonight, but he gave Bret a chance to say that he, Ric Flair, is the best. It's a final warning, basically. Bret preferred to let his actions speak on Saturday. Now, up to this point, Bret Hart didn't compete because of the whole no-compete clause. By Sold Out, that had expired. The match had some decent hype behind it, and some actually wanted this to main event. Because on paper, 2 of the all-time greats facing off for the first time in several years. Add to that, it was Bret Hart's first match in WCW, so it had a real claim. The 13-time world champion against the man who was the pillar of a new generation. Also, I still can't get over how terrible that music is. It just sounds like those highlight reels with dubbed music or something. It's just bad. So let's talk about the match. Ric Flair was already at it with the mind games. Hart was showing that he's serious and quickly locked Flair in the figure 4. Anything you can do, I can do better. Flair was struggling and so lost his composure, leading to a dominant moment from Bret. There's the obligatory backdrop, and even though Flair had the time to think of a proper game plan, Bret Hart was all over him. And then the ref looked elsewhere, and there's the opening. Several minutes of Bret Hart in control goes nowhere, and Ric Flair was officially on offense. Hart was showing effort and resiliency and isolated Ric Flair's left leg. This didn't lead to much, and the opponent focused on softening him up with a figure 4. He finally locked it in a few minutes later, and Bret was in agony. There was nothing to do because he was stuck in the middle of the ring, and Flair was rubbing salt in the wound, but Hart persevered. He managed to counter the figure 4 to break it, and Flair for the 1000th time thought maybe it'll work this time, but the aerial move clearly didn't. At this point, he's like, why not? And starts chopping Bret, who no-sold it, and started whooping his ass. And there it is, the sharpshooter. Flair tapped after a few seconds, and Bret was victorious. In his first WCW matchup, I should know. Good stuff. Is it the epic Bret Hart match? Well, kind of. It's not going to be in his top 10, nor Flair's, but it's an enjoyable first match for the Hitman, and it was certainly one of his best matches from the wretched WCW run. He would obviously have issues with Ric Flair as time went on. They had heat. They'd be burying each other several years later, but around this time period, he was talking positive about him on television. In interviews, he'd be like, oh, Hogan and Flair, this and that, and it's funny looking back on it. Off to the next story. On the match from Sold Out, Bret Hart thanked Ric Flair for the great performance and told him that he's wrong. Ric Flair, despite last night, will always be the man, and Hart was looking forward to the future. He said that the only reason why he's even in WCW is for the World Heavyweight Championship. Hart was set out to prove that sooner or later, he was going to be the best WCW champion there ever was. Spoiler alert, he wasn't. And this promo was funny in hindsight. Hart was talking about challenging for that title. Yeah, by the time he got his first title shot, WCW changed their logo. Vince Russo signed and The Rock won the world title 3 times. For some random reason, Hart disappeared for a few weeks. He was completely missing, but at the same time, WCW was teasing a potential feud between Hollywood and the Hitman. Hogan was pissed over how things had transpired and somewhat held Bret responsible for Starrcade. He even said that if he has to, he'll come over to Canada and beat his ass. Nonetheless, the Hitman finally made his return on the February 16th episode of Nitro. Gene Okerlund interviewed him and asked the questions about Hulk Hogan. He's like, Hogan makes excuses or whatever, and Hart claimed that he was scared of him and said that searching for him, Bret, is not necessary. All he has to do is call his name once. Bret said that Hogan had been running away for years, but that's coming to a stop. All of a sudden, Bryan Adams interrupted. He told Bret that he's got his back. They've been buddies for years, and told Hogan that if he wants Bret, he should go through him. This turned out to be an ambush as the NWO came in and attacked, and yes, here's member 45 of the faction. Rick Rude, Vincent coming, and Hart's taking a beating. Hogan slowly walking in like dinner served and takes his shots. Suddenly, Ric Flair makes a run in and whoops their asses, and Hart stands up. They clear house to send them walking. Those two shake hands, which generates a round of applause from the fans, and it was clearly looking like that Hart and Hogan match was going to happen. Later that week, NWO Tier 2 decided to poke fun at the incident from Monday. Rick Rude asked Curt Hennig, like, why out of everyone did you choose Bret the I Quit Man Hart to pick on? To Hennig, it was all about what he never even got to finish the statement because the Bulldog and the Anvil came out. Right out of the gate, Jim began shouting at the trio, telling them they should fight, and they did just that, and it's an impromptu match. This turned out to be a load of nothing because the match was thrown out. Now, why did Bryan Adams turn his back on Bret Hart? He didn't really give much of a reason, but he kicked up the intensity and threatened Mean Gene. Adams provoked the Hitman and said straight up that if they ever meet, he wouldn't break a sweat, and as he's talking, Bret interrupts. The Hitman told him that they can do it anywhere without the need of ambushes, and Adams struck. The Hitman brought the fight, but the newest member of the NWO showed more intensity. His mistake was hitting the elbow, giving way to Bret fighting back, and he was relentless in the attack and even locked him in the sharpshooter. Curt Hennig, though, from out of nowhere, struck, and the fans were back to being quiet. For only a few seconds, though, as Bret fought back. The numbers got to him, but once again, Ric Flair came to his aid. He chopped Adams and Hennig right out of there, and after the heels walked away, the Nature Boy issued a statement. He said the Hogans, the Hennigs have all tried to prevail, but today, Bret Hart is the best there is, the best there was, and today, the best there ever will be. Flair appreciated that Bret didn't trash him the other week after their match had sold out, and after this, the Hitman challenged Curt Hennig to a match at Uncensored. Flair messed around for a few seconds, and that's the segment. A few days later on Thunder, Hennig accepted the challenge and told Mike today that Bret Hart must be one of the stupidest human beings alive for turning down the NWO. He even questioned Bret for thinking he can beat him and promised that he's going to go down at Uncensored. Fast forward to the March 2nd, 1998 episode of Nitro, and Bret Hart's set to have his first match on television. Hart faced Bryan Adams in the semi-main event. He didn't give him much time to prepare, but it didn't matter. He gave Bret somewhat of a hard time, but it didn't mean much in the long run, and Hart was on his way to victory. Hennig, though, caused a DQ and a brawl ensued, and it took a while for Adams to recover, but once he did, he caught Bret and slammed him down on the entranceway. Other than this, there was one moment where Bret saved Ric Flair from an NWO attack in the build-up to Uncensored. So basically, when you look at it from one perspective, it looks like Bret was on the road to facing Hollywood Hogan, and Curt Hennig was going to be a roadblock of sorts. Now let's talk about the match itself. It of course pales in comparison to their previous matches. Now their SummerSlam match is one of my all-time favorites from the event's history. This one in particular, while it may not have been a superb affair, it was decent. Bret donned a Canadian Hitman jersey, and as expected, it was pure wrestling in the beginning. Hart managed to do enough in order to frustrate Hennig, who needed to get back on track. His efforts were almost disastrous as Hart quickly locked in a sharpshooter. Then Rick Rude took advantage of the ref and whacked him in the face. Hennig decided to target the left leg, and he locked in the figure 4. And at the same time, Rude was aiding him with some illegal leverage, but Hart remained in the match. It took him a while to fight back, but when he did, Hennig was flopping around like a fish. Nonetheless, the opponent tossed him into the turnbuckle and hit the perfect plex. However, Bret kicked out. Series of roll-ups from here, and Hennig's caught in the sharpshooter. He taps, but afterwards, Rude attacks. He put a whooping on the Hitman. Hennig tossed a chair in his face, and it was clear that this wasn't over. Good match. I enjoyed it, It's not out of this world or anything like that, but it's decent enough. Just don't expect SummerSlam 91 or King of the Ring 93, and maybe you'll be satisfied. Bret Hart, he didn't appear the next night. I don't know if it's a running gag of sorts, but that's how it was at the time. He'd have a match, disappear for like 1 or 2 weeks. But Hennig and Rude decided to speak about him on Thunder and talked about Sunday. They're talking about how they ruled the wrestling business for 15 years and took a jab at the whole best there is statement. The Hitman finally returned on Nitro later that week, saving the Bulldog from Hennig and Rude, and he tossed him around and locked Curt in the sharpshooter. Suddenly, Bryan Adams makes a run in and accomplishes nothing. Vincent, Conan, Norton, all those guys were taken out, and the Hitman was a one-man show. And this was probably the loudest the crowd were for him up to this point. He mentioned the whole Bret screwed Bret thing and said that from here on, whenever he sees some injustice, he's going to do something about it. Why? Because Hart didn't want anybody to endure what he did. since Bret Hart was now a vigilante apparently, but once again came to the rescue of his family, beating on the same people in the same ring. He reiterated his statements from last time, but said that Hogan's next. Oh, and if 2 attacks on the same people in the same type of situation wasn't enough, there was a third one on Nitro, and it was the same stuff as the previous week, but this time, the fans were booing him. Basically, Bret Hart's only personality trait here was, I'm not gonna let others get screwed like me. Oh, did you know I got screwed over? That's how it was at the time, and no wonder the fans booed. Like, they just didn't give a damn about this. At the same time, he was eyeing championship gold. He trashed Nash and Hogan, and at one point, he showed great respect to Sting and even said, quote-unquote, if there's ever a situation you need me, just call me, I'll be there. Speaking of that, Bret screwed Nash over and whooped his ass at the end of a Nitro, and he was doing this because of Savage's interference. Fans weren't that happy. NWO once again tries attempted to drop him, but Bret Hart had that John Cena versus Nexus type strength. Of course, this greatly pissed off Kevin Nash, and he's like, oh, you made the biggest mistake. But this wasn't the biggest story of the night, though, as there were huge issues within the NWO. But anyways, those two featured in a star-studded tag team match along with Randy Savage and Sting. This match ended in a DQ finish, of course, because this is WCW. What followed on Nitro is considered to be one of the most infamous moments of Bret Hart's run in WCW. So Randy Savage and Hollywood were facing off for the title. The Disciple interferes, and because of this, Big Sexy runs in all pissed. Bischoff held on, causing Hogan and the Disciple to attack. Nonetheless, Kevin Nash jackknifed him and placed Savage above Hogan, and then all of a sudden, here comes Bret Hart! Bret Hart whacks Nash in the opposite place, Hogan on top of Savage, and everybody's confused. Fans boo. Fans were booing the moment they saw him come out from the back. Piper didn't understand what's up, but Bret made it loud and clear with a strike, and this is one of the most random things to have occurred. The way Bret Hart was booked in the 5 months was odd, you know. He was a very valuable asset to WCW. I'm not saying he should have won 10 titles in 5 months, but at the very least, the beginnings should have led to the Hogan and Bret match. With the turn, he suddenly became great buddies with him and was kept down a bit. He never challenged for the title despite the turn, and it was just awkward. He was also brought in to help WCW in Canada, but compared to WWF, they didn't really have much of a presence there. When I look at it, I do not like it. You know, they could have gone a few different ways. I'm not saying, oh, he should have never turned heel. I think he should have turned heel later that year anyways, but I don't think that was the right moment. I would continue the video from here on, but that's honestly more suited for a full-on heel Bret Hart video or videos. The environment there didn't help Bret's case, and his character around here was, I got screwed and I got screwed. That's it. But hey, he was making that money, and what I find funny is him saying that occasionally WCW would pay for his first-class flight, hotel, and limo. Yeah, leave him off shows. It's pretty funny to me. Now, if I were to give a positive from this run, well, I like the Ric Flair story. They continue from there on with some more interesting things. It would be liked a bit more, you know, if it eventually led to that Hogan and Bret match. But there were issues backstage. After that, WCW was clueless what to do with Bret Hart from the moment he came. So it just didn't work. I'll dive into his weird run with the company in future videos. Alright, what do you guys think of Bret Hart's debut in WCW? Please comment down below. That's the first video. Make sure you hit the pile driver on the like button and perhaps the sharpshooter on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.